Moving on to the next question. This is from Loury M. Last initial is M. Question for Glenn. After watching the January 6th hearings last night, I'd like you to revisit the question of whether Donald Trump should have a Twitter account. From what you said earlier in a conversation with John, it appears that you think it's outrageous that a former president and likely future presidential candidate should be denied an account on the most influential political social media platform. I did say that. I agree that there should be a high bar for denying an account to such an individual. But do you really believe that there should be no constraints at all on what can be posted? I didn't say that. How about the classic no yelling fire in a theater constraint? Trump's flat out lie about the 2020 election being stolen provoked the attempted insurrection on January 6th and continues to drive efforts all over the country to interfere with and delegitimize the next election, which would result in a constitutional crisis or an outright override of the voting results by state legislatures or congressional representatives. Isn't it reasonable for a private company to refuse to allow that platform to be used to instigate a coup d'etat? Okay, so there you are, the January 6th narrative. Trump is a threat to American democracy, an existential threat. The case is clear. It was an attempted coup d'etat, an insurrection. They tried to seize and interfere with the normal processes of government that would have resulted in the confirmation of Joseph Biden's electoral victory. Trump was playing around with that. That's the whole point of January 6th. Coup d'etat. Do you want to give the general who's getting ready to lead a military insurrection access to the microphone in the country? Do you want to give a political demagogue who's whipping up mobs of people who might run into the street and commit violence access to a megaphone or a platform? Do you want to give a political candidate who you think constitutes a threat to the future of the country access to the microphone? My answer is yes. My answer is unequivocally yes. Should a convicted murderer be denied a Twitter account because he's a convicted murderer? I don't think so. Who's going to make these decisions, and what world are we ushering in when we get to censor who gets to speak based upon an assessment of their character or their politics? No. Incitement to violence? Yeah. Yeah. Let's go out and burn that bitch down? Yeah. That's shouting fire in a crowded theater. But thinking that the result of the election was contrary to what it was that was decided by the people who print newspapers or who count votes, thinking that there was fraud, you're going to shut somebody up for thinking that there was fraud? Flip the script on that. What about the person who thinks the election was illegitimate because blacks were required to present a driver's license before they could cast a ballot? That person is not allowed to actually question whether or not there were shenanigans. In your very statement, Loury, you say you're not sure that the 2022 elections are going to be good because local Republican officials have control over the apparatus, and you suggest that they might use it, prompted by Trump, to undermine the election. Should you be banned from being able to say that after an election which Republicans won? So the idea that you would take the Tribune, that's right, I called Donald Trump a Tribune. He stands in for people. People support him. Tens upon tens of millions of them support him. He's only a threat because the demos says he might be reelected. That's what makes Donald Trump a threat. He has supporters. He can't go out and call for the army to overthrow the government, but he can go out and say what he's saying about what he's saying, and he can be refuted to that end. So
What about the violence one?
What about it?
It kind of comes down to a discussion we had before. It seems that in this case, it's not just an opinion. It's an opinion which, within our particular specific circumstances, as they happen to have come now, the cocktail that we're swirling around in, there are many people who are willing to commit acts of violence, say they are, and one actually did it, in the name of the things that Trump is saying. He's not calling explicitly for violence, but when he says those things, there are people who are ready to do really insurrectional things. Doesn't that count for anything?
No. There are people who, when Rachel Maddow says something, grab a rifle and go out and shoot Steve Scalise. There are people throughout the summer of 2020, when one or another Black Lives Matter spokesperson would say something, who were willing to go and do horrible things. There are people who are prepared to attack the Congress because they want independence for Puerto Rico. There were Weather Underground who were agitated and encouraged by certain kinds of radical speakers. The Antifa people actually have sources of inspiration that one finds within the wildly progressive left. Who's going to decide these things? Who's going to say, oh, if I allow that speech, then his supporters might get overly exercised and they might do a violent thing.
How often do you have legislation be affected by things that are past and current? And in this case, I just find myself thinking, yeah, there was the Weather Underground, and I can imagine somebody making a decision then saying that if there had been Twitter, barring certain radical kinds of people from making their statements because of, a building blowing up in Greenwich Village, that kind of leftism went out of fashion for reasons they discussed. Now we have that coming from the right, and we have it now. And there's a part of me that isn't the idea of steering the ship supposed to be that if there's something that is practically at the root of that kind of rage and urge for destruction, that at least temporarily you shut that off. Know that that's not the consistent kind of reasoning that ideal legislation and ideal administrative procedure should seek. I understand the consistency aspect to it, but when is vigilance, so to speak, necessary? The grand theme. When is it necessary to just break the rules and do something that we know is right, even if it doesn't exactly fit what we have on the books? And it's a question that I don't have an answer to, but I find myself thinking that way in a case like this.
It scares the bejesus out of me that reasonable people think that Twitter should decide that a major political figure should not have access to their platform because they disagree with his politics. That terrifies me.
Not his politics, it's that he would be happy to see yahoos overthrow the government in the name of a lie and in the name of his own monomaniacal self-image.
Okay, I'm not going to dispute the wildly hyperbolic character of that statement. I mean, the last sentence of Loury's question here is, isn't it reasonable for a private company to refuse to allow their platform to be used to instigate a coup d'etat? Is Trump 2024 the road to a coup d'etat?
It's rather clear that he wouldn't mind if there were one. Maybe that's not enough. Trump would not have minded if things had gone further on January 6th. I think we can say that. At no point has he ever expressed that he's glad that things calmed down, and he's given little winks that he liked the way the whole thing went. He wouldn't have minded if something...
Let me not even... I'm not going there, John, with you to parse that. I'll just say this. That's a good reason not to vote for him. That's not a good reason to keep him from talking.
If everybody were in a village... If there were 150 people, and this is somebody who stands up on a hill, whips people up to do terrible things, would you be in favor of shutting that man up? Because that's what Twitter is. It makes us a village. Would you be in favor of saying, it's time for you to stop having these things where all these people sit at your feet and you whip them up into doing terrible things? You shut up. Stop getting up on that hill. You get up on there anymore.
Well, I'm not sure how to respond because I can't remember whether it's the negative or the positive. I would not be in favor of shutting up the person. Incitement in the crowded theater situation is one thing, but what about somebody on the left? What about somebody who thinks the Supreme Court ought to be packed? What about somebody who thinks the Electoral College should be gotten rid of? What about somebody who thinks that you ought to actually literally defund the police? What about someone who thinks that the people shouldn't have to pay their rent? What about a demagogue who has a mass following that threatens to overthrow the capitalist foundations of the country? Okay, now there are a lot of people who are nodding, yeah, good, to every one of the things that I just said, and God love you. I think I'm maybe married to one of them. But the idea that I'm one of those 9 justices sitting up there, or I'm one of these fat cats in a corporate office at the top of one of those tall buildings somewhere, managing billions or whatever, and that I would say, those people are dangerous. They threaten the foundations of our civilization. Actually, I think they do. I think the radical left does threaten the foundation of our prosperity. I think they got their heads far up their butts. I think they're dangerous people. I think if they got anywhere close to power, they'd be a lot worse for this country than with Donald Trump. I'll even say that much. The people who want to get rid of capitalism and the people who want to get rid of the cops and the people who want everything to be free and the people, et cetera, who have political ideas that I disagree with. Suppose they become close to actually getting power. Right now, they're a drag on the Democratic Party. They're actually useful to someone who doesn't like the left program because they're way too far left. Suppose things change and they come close to getting power. I have to refute them at the ballot box. I have to persuade my fellow Americans that their ideas are wrong. I can't win that fight with them about the future of my country by telling them to shut up. They won't go away. Believe me, you will reap what you sow. It's a step on the road to a kind of unfree society. And just because Silicon Valley happens to be left of center just now, you watch out. So, no.
Okay.
We're moving on, Loury. Thanks for the question. I know I'm in hot water now. I know, guys, but I love my country just like the next person, and it's for that reason I'm taking the position I'm taking. John.